My name is Lida Beecher, teacher at the Poland Central School District, the Village of Poland, Town of Russia, Herkimer County, New York. That is, I was a teacher there in 1914. See, I was killed, murdered, they say, by one of my former students, a 16-year-old boy named Jean Gianini. I was just 21 years old. I liked it in Poland. It was beautiful there, nestled at the edge of the Adirondack Mountains alongside the meandering West Canada Creek. I came there after graduating from the Cortland Normal School. That's a school for those who want to be teachers. In 1914, Poland had a population of just 350 people, citizens who worked hard as farmers, dairy ranchers, merchants, factory workers, enduring its rugged snowy winters and enjoying its wonderful warm summers. It had been my dream to be a teacher. I loved children and enjoyed instilling the knowledge in them that would help them become strong adults, citizens, and parents. And though I liked it here, I was very excited at the prospect of another teaching position I had applied for, because it was at my alma mater, Onondaga Valley Academy. But it was not to be. Fate intervened on that cold, rainy day in March. By the way, my name is really Lydia, but everyone calls me Lida. I liked Jean. Yes, he was a difficult child. There's no doubt about that. But I wanted to help him. It was so clear to me that he needed help. And here, he's on trial for my murder. What was the truth about why Jean had killed me? What was the truth about Jean?
Let's come to order. Mr. Thomas?
Gentlemen of the jury, the people will prove that Jean Gianini, the defendant in this case, planned and executed a cold-blooded murder.
That's Charles Thomas, the prosecuting attorney.
The motive was this. He said that Miss Beecher had humiliated him as a teacher, and months later, while he was away from home at another school, St. Vincent's Industrial School in Utica, he made up his mind that when he got out, he would get even with her. He made his plans known to 3 of his young associates. And his motive was always to get even.
Gentlemen of the jury, this indeed was a most brutal and gruesome crime, and a most unfortunate end to the life of a beautiful Christian woman.
That's Mr. McIntyre, the defense attorney. He's from New York City.
But was Jean Gianini truly responsible for the death of Lida Beecher? The defense will prove that Jean, 16 years old, is in fact a victim himself, born into a household of vice and violence.
This defendant lured Miss Beecher to Buck Hill Road in Poland, telling her that his father was building a house up there. She, being ignorant of the danger, and little knowing that this would be her last trip over this road, when she hesitated, he whipped out a monkey wrench.
The result is a boy that experts will testify has the mentality of a 10-year-old.
And dealt her a blow to the head that felled her to the ground. But that wasn't the only blow. There was another blow. And then
Jean didn't walk until he was 3 years old. He didn't speak until he was of the age of 7.
he pulled out a knife that he had prepared the day previous and stabbed it into the back of her neck, into the side of her forehead, and various other parts of the body. Then he grabbed Lida Beecher by the right leg, dragged her through a barbed fence, and left Lida Beecher slowly bleeding to death.
As the boy sits here, he has the reason and moral capacity of a small child, what the experts have diagnosed as an imbecile, as fragile mentally as a robin's egg, and will remain so the rest of his life.
An unwarranted claim if based on fact. Gentlemen of the jury, we expect that you will not be swayed by age, mentality, or circumstance.
A life we trust you will spare from the executioner.
We expect that you will find this defendant guilty of murder in the first degree.
Please, gentlemen, take up the evidence and render a verdict of not guilty.
And so it began. My life was gone, and Jean was on trial for his. The two men you just heard, the attorneys on either side, both wanted the same thing, really. Justice. But what was justice in this case? That's what they each needed to prove.
Mr. Thomas.
If it pleases the court, the people would like to call Mrs. Ethel Beecher.
Oh, Ethel, how lovely you look. Ethel was my best friend in Poland. Later became my sister-in-law. She married my brother Willis, though I didn't live to see it. Ethel and I both taught at the Poland Central School together and boarded at Mr. Countryman's home on Coldbrook Street. She left Poland shortly after my death.
Mrs. Beecher, did you know this defendant, Jean Gianini?
I did.
And at any time prior to her death, had you seen this defendant and Miss Beecher together?
Yes. When he visited the Countryman home where Lida and I boarded, it was about the middle of February, I should say. He came on an errand, came to get yeast as I remember it from Mrs. Countryman.
Now, was there any talk then between Miss Beecher and the defendant?
Yes.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get away from Poland.
Why, Jean?
I don't like it here. I'd rather jump on the train and leave.
What would you like to do with your life, Jean?
I'd engineer the biggest train in the world. Drive it through all the big places. Park it in New York City.
Jean, wouldn't you rather stay here, live on a farm, perhaps work for your father in the furniture business? Wouldn't that suit you better, Jean? And what about your education and your home?
I told you, I don't like my home. I hate my father, and I sure don't want to be some miserable old chair salesman or sawbuster.
Would you rather return to school?
I guess. But my father says I'm not smart enough. I hate him. You know, he once trashed me good for stealing apples. My others put me up to it. I never stole anything but once in my life. Once. And that was from a lady in New York who gave me 25 cents to buy her candy. But I bought candy and I ate it myself. Hey, Miss Clark, is there a state's prison in Rochester? Or a reform school?
He asked you this because he knew you were from Rochester.
Yes. I believe they've all been moved to industry.
What's it like? Maybe I'd like to be there. What about the state's prison in Auburn? They got the electric chair. The murderer, Chester Gillette. He fried in it. Killed his girlfriend and was on trial right there in Herkimer.
You laughed at him.
Yes.
Was it his acts and speech that you found amusing?
No, it was the conversation.
Because his conversation was ridiculous? Silly?
Because it seemed as if he had been planning on going to some institution and asked about them for that reason.
Did you see Lida Beecher and Jean together on any other occasions?
Yes, on Wednesday, March 25th.
Now, Mrs. Beecher, tell us about it in your own way.
We started down to the post office about 7 o'clock or a little before, as was our habit every evening. As we were leaving the post office, we were met by Jean Gianini, and he walked with us.
Miss Beecher, when are you coming to see my father?
Well, I don't know, Jean, but
I don't believe you intend to come at all. You'll wait until summertime, then you'll go home, and it'll be too late.
Now, this conversation was regarding Jean's returning to school.
Yes.
Jean, I have every intention of going to see your father. But I think it would be better for you to wait until the beginning of another term. Otherwise, you'll be behind the other pupils in your work.
Ugh.
Now, on Friday evening, March 27th, the day of her death, when and where did you see Miss Beecher last?
In her room that night, it was between 10 minutes to 7 and 7 o'clock when we left the room.
She left, and you never saw her again.
I never did.
As far as you know, Mrs. Beecher, Miss Beecher was always kindly and generously disposed toward the defendant, the boy, wasn't she? She took considerable interest in him, didn't she?
Yes, sir.
That is all, Mrs. Beecher.
Oh, Ethel. Oh, I miss you.
I called more witnesses for the people. 16-year-old Gertrude Trask. She lived across the street from the Gianninis. She testified that she and her friends saw Jean walking together that evening.
And just before that, how Jean childishly ran up behind the girls, pulled off Gertrude's hat, and poked the other one in the back.
She saw them walking together toward Buck Hill Road.
Or toward the Giannini's house from where they were. It's the same direction. And anyway, she didn't tell us anything that would indicate that Jean was carrying a monkey wrench, a knife, or a rope.
She couldn't even tell if he was wearing an overcoat. She said, "I didn't look at him much anyway." And what did Jean Giannini say to Leo Coonrat? Oh, let's see. Oh, wait. Sorry, there was, the next witness was 15-year-old Claude Barnhart. He also said he saw Lida walking with Jean together that night toward Buck Hill Road.
Please, Mr. Thomas. North, toward the Giannini's home. And anyway, he couldn't see anything about Jean's body that would indicate Jean was carrying a knife, a gun, a rope, a monkey wrench, or any weapon. He didn't even know if Jean was wearing an overcoat.
Carlisle Danning also saw them walking together north on Cold Brook Street,
Thank you.
which is in the direction of Buck Hill Road.
Mr. Thomas. He didn't even know Lida. So this 14-year-old couldn't swear to whether it was her he saw walking with Jean or not.
Pardon P. Sanders was at the barber shop on Main Street at 10 minutes past 8, a time at which the killing was known to have happened.
Yet he couldn't even tell if Jean was wearing long or short pants or had on an overcoat. Yet the next day after the killing, he testified to the coroner that Jean had been wearing moccasins.
Also at Tom McMahon's barber shop was Henry Graves. Henry Graves also saw Jean running toward the train depot.
Toward the depot doesn't mean he was going to the depot.
Then there was Sarah Hutchinson, wife of Samuel, owners of the trucking and teaming business where Jean was employed. Jean also took his meals there. Mrs. Hutchinson, where is your home?
Poland.
Previous to March 27th?
The day I died.
And on that day, this defendant was employed by you?
Yes, sir.
And what did you have, how long had he been employed by you?
Oh, 8 or 9 days.
What did you have to do about the place?
Mostly drive horses, but a little bit of everything around the village. Help draw freight.
Was he to work for you on March 27th, 1914?
Yes, sir.
On the evening of the 27th, the evening of the fatal incident, did you eat dinner at home at the same time as Jean?
Yes, sir.
And you sat at the same table with him? Were you there when he finished his meal?
Yes, sir. Sat by the side of him.
Did he eat heartily?
Oh, yes, sir. He asked me for a second piece of cake.
What time did he leave that evening?
About 7 o'clock.
Did you see him again after that?
No, sir.
When was the next time you saw him?
The next morning, about 6:30. And that was all I saw of him until he came in for his breakfast. He ate his breakfast and then he went out. He ate but very little.
Now, when you went out into the barn that next morning, did you notice whether anyone had done the chores or not?
Yes, everything except milking the cows, which my husband always did.
Now, had there been anyone in the barn other than the defendant?
Yes, sir. Me.
No, I mean, anyone to have done the chores.
Me.
And you had done the chores?
That's right.
So, as far as you know, the defendant didn't do any chores in your presence.
Not in my presence.
Thank you. The people would like to call James D. Countryman. Mr. Countryman, did you know Miss Lida Beecher?
I would have known her 2 years in September.
Mr. Countryman owned the boarding house where Ethel and I lived together.
Now, on March 27th, did you see Miss Beecher at any time after supper?
I did not.
And on March 28th, I take it you received word of this affair?
I did.
And did you go to a point on Buck Hill Road?
Yes, there were 4 or 5 in the party of us. Owen Lewis, Will Miller. We went up to the top of the hill. That is where the crime was committed, as we had supposed.
Where there was an apple tree.
It can get very snowy up on Buck Hill Road. It was 18 inches deep that day.
What, if anything, did you observe?
We observed blood on the road across from the apple tree.
Your Honor, I dislike the word blood used. If the witness could state something resembling blood.
Please, just describe what you saw.
I saw there had been some crime committed.
Move to strike that out.
Let Ben go out.
Did you see any pressing down of the snow?
Yes, sir. on the left-hand side, down through a ravine where there was a barbed wire fence and a scrub apple tree.
What, if anything, did you find?
I found Miss Lida Beecher lying face down in a crimp of willows.
Dear Mr. Countryman, he was always very kind and fair to me.
And her skirts was drawn up, so I lifted up her feet and I smoothed them out.
Always a decent man.
At the time you arrived, could you tell whether Miss Beecher was dead?
I think so. Her hair was messed up and bloody. I got a horse blanket and I covered her up.
Thank you, Mr. Countryman.
Now, on any occasion prior to March 27th, had you seen this defendant at your place when Miss Beecher was present?
I had.
The conduct of each toward the other on that occasion, was there any evidence of unfriendliness?
Not in the least.
Did you hear any angry words exchanged between them at all?
Not in the least.
Miss Beecher was a gentle girl, wasn't she? Never gave any evidence of bad temper, bore herself always as a lady?
Very. Every time.
As you observed Jean at these meetings, did he show any evidence of bad temper or anger?
No.
Thank you, sir.
Now I presented to the witnesses who helped discover Miss Beecher's body several photographs that depict the state of her bloody body on Buck Hill Road.
And I objected. The display of these photographs in such a manner is inclined to imperil the jury's objectivity. It's calculated to bias and prejudice the rights of my defendant and to impassion and inflame the minds of the jurors.
And we have many witnesses who testified as to Jean Gianini's intent. There was 13-year-old Lawrence Lamb, who he was a schoolmate of the defendant, was told by the defendant that, quote, he would someday put an end to Miss Lida Beecher, unquote.
And
that was approximately 1 week before the killing.
And that Miss Beecher was always kind and gentle toward him, so that Jean would have had no reason whatsoever to contemplate violence against her.
He was kind and gentle. She was kind and gentle to all of her students, but she made Jean sit apart from the other students.
Was not my idea at all.
And she sent him to Principal Robinson for throwing wads of paper and tipping over his chair.
The other boys also threw paper.
Yes, that is true.
And what did Jean Gianini say to Leo Coonrat 2 or 3 weeks before the murder? He would someday do something that the people of Poland would be sorry for.
I object. The statement is meaningless. He could have been talking about something completely different for all we know.
Overruled.
There was James Brothers. He saw Jean loitering at the train depot, asked him why he wasn't in school, and he said he had trouble with Miss Beecher. He said he was going to get even with her before spring.
Yet Mr. Brothers wasn't worried enough about it that he did anything. He didn't attempt to divert the defendant. He didn't communicate his worries to Miss Beecher or to the police. He treated it as the statement it was, the idle talk of a boy.
Lawrence Larn, who worked at the feed store where Jean also worked, one day was moving Jean's coat, found it to be heavy, and in the pocket was a monkey wrench.
That was a full 2 weeks before the killing, far too remote.
A monkey wrench with broken wood on the handle, exactly the same as the one found at the scene of the murder.
He never used the word wrench, and I object.
Thomas Rooney was also there. He said he saw the wrench in Jean's hand.
We object, Your Honor.
Others testified as to Jean's inquiries about Miss Beecher. He was questioning about her movements about town.
Once again, we object.
There was also Estes Campo. He worked with Jean. He related how Jean said, quote, "If I had a revolver, I would kill her," unquote.
And when Campo got mad at him for saying that, Jean replied that, quote, "He was just kidding," unquote.
Lawyers do like to argue.
The people like to call Arthur E. Sprague. What is your business, Mr. Sprague?
Undertaker and furniture dealer.
Now, on the morning of the 28th of March, were you called to take a body from Buck Hill Road?
I was. It was the body of Lida Beecher.
If Your Honor please, the constant repetition of the harrowing details of the death is calculated to impassion the minds of the jurors and deprive the defendant of a fair and just trial, to distract the jurors from the true issues at stake here.
Overruled.
What did you do, Mr. Sprague?
I found the body there covered with a horse blanket. I raised the body up and put it in my casket wagon and took it down to my undertaking parlor, which is right next door to my furniture emporium.
And subsequently, an autopsy was performed in your presence by Dr. Fred J. Douglas.
Yes, sir. On Sunday afternoon, in the neighborhood of 3 o'clock.
And what did the autopsy find?
A white woman, well nourished, about 126 pounds. The hair was filled with clotted blood, some dirt. There were clots of blood on the face. There was also a puncture wound in the forehead. On the right side of the scalp, there were 5 puncture wounds or lacerations. On the back of the scalp, a laceration. On the back of the neck, there was a puncture wound, more puncture wounds, and abrasions. We also found a hole in the external carotid artery.
Now, was Dr. Douglas able to determine the cause of death?
Shock and hemorrhage due to the wounds, principally the carotid artery.
Caused by?
Well, Dr. Douglas's opinion was that the wounds to the head were caused by a blunt instrument, and the wounds to the neck and shoulders by a sharp instrument.
Thank you, sir. Now,
My card?
on the morning after the murder,
My card?
on the morning after the murder, Jean Gianini was seen in Newport, 6 miles east of Poland, moving rather quickly. He was stopped by George Sweet, who was sent by the boy's father to retrieve him. The defendant resisted.
What does the old man want now?
He was held at Autenritz's meat store until Frank Newman arrived with his wagon to take the boy back to Poland.
I knew this guy for a long time. Several times, he found me and fetched me back home when I tried to run away.
What'd you skip out again for this time, Gene? Your father and others are looking for you.
I ain't skipping out. I'm going to Herkimer.
What for?
See the picture show.
I'm taking you back to Poland. Get in the wagon.
You had a conversation with the boy on the ride home?
I did.
All the way from Newport to Poland, the boy never expressed a desire to leave you, did he?
No, sir.
Did he show any anxiety, any fright?
No, sir. Did you hear what happened in Poland?
Yes.
You heard that your teacher, Miss Beecher, was murdered?
No.
So you maintain there was no anxiety, no worry?
No, he just looked to the left a little bit. He was quiet, if anything. Well, they're looking for you for it. You've got murder facing you now.
They can't give me but 10 years, can they?
They're gonna give you quite a long term. They're liable to give you the chair.
Even after this conversation, he expressed to you no fear or fright?
No, sir.
And as you drove on into the village of Poland,
There's some rigs coming down the hill, and he says,
They're coming off the hill there now.
Jean, there's Miss Beecher's body in the rig. He just kind of hunched over. He didn't say anything after that.
so you then took Jean to the barn where you first met his father and later the sheriff.
Yes, sir.
Jean never once tried to escape, did he, Mr. Newman?
No, sir.
You've known Jean for a long time. Have you ever observed his odd behavior?
There was this one time. He was trying to walk a clothesline like a clown on a tightrope. He just kept falling off and trying again and laughing.
And didn't he once tell you how he had been punished when he was at St. Vincent's Industrial School?
My father sent me there for juvenile delinquency. I was there for 6 rotten months.
He showed me his hands where he said he'd been strapped.
Thank you, Mr. Newman.
The people will call Deputy Sheriff John Nellis. Mr. Nellis, do you recall March 28th, 1914?
I do.
And did you have an occasion to talk with this defendant?
Well, I was with the boy until afternoon, about 3 o'clock, in the parlor of the Justice of Peace of Justice Fred Morris's house.
And you had a very extended conversation with him?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and state what that conversation was.
Your Honor, please, I would like to ask 1 or 2 questions before this conversation is detailed.
You may do so.
Was Jean there under an accusation?
I had him in custody by order of the sheriff.
Was the Justice of the Peace present?
Not in the room.
Was the district attorney present?
No.
Was the defendant there for the purpose of arraigning him before the justice?
No.
Was he arraigned that day?
Not as I know of.
Was he actually under arrest?
Not as I know of.
Did you tell him that anything he might say would be used against him, that he had the right to the benefit of counsel?
Well, I did tell him that his father had engaged Mr. Haynes to represent him as his attorney.
Don't you know that his father was not allowed in the room? Was Mr. Hayne present?
Not at that time, but later.
Don't you know that the doors were locked?
No,
When Mr. Hayne tried to enter? Oh, for God's sake, give me that.
No,
This boy was stripped of his clothing while in your custody. How long was he without his clothes?
about a minute.
Was there a fire in the room?
No.
And you asked him questions about the crime on Buck Hill.
Yes, I told him I thought he was guilty.
Recognizing that the boy was entitled to the benefit of counsel, why didn't you go and get Mr. Hayne, who was in that very house?
Well, he never said he wanted him.
Did you make any effort to bring the boy's father in the room?
No.
When you spoke to the boy, was the boy naked or did he have his clothes on?
Oh, he had his clothes on, all but his shirt.
Finish, Mr. McIntyre. Mr. Nellis, please just state the conversation between you and the boy.
Your Honor, we object on the ground that the statement was obtained from the defendant by implied threats and not made voluntarily. He was not informed of his rights. He was denied his right to counsel. In fact, this witness permitted no one to have access to the defendant, and the statement was obtained in violation of my client's constitutional rights.
Overruled.
Mr. Nellis, tell us what the defendant said.
Well, I said to him that he killed Miss Beecher, and I asked him how you got her up that hill. And at first he said, I don't know nothing about it. But then I said, I think you do. And he said, I had trouble with her and I wanted revenge. I asked her to go up to my folks' house to talk to him about going back to school.
The defendant renews the objection.
Overruled.
He met her by the hotel.
Sorry I could not go with you yesterday, Jean. Speak with your father. I had a prayer meeting.
That's okay, Miss Beecher.
But I'm ready to go now. This is a very good idea, Jean. Going back to school will do you a world of good.
I suppose it would.
Your father's house is down this street, is it not?
Oh, he's building a new house up the hill. He's up there.
Oh, when did he start that?
A short time ago. He's working on it now. Just up the hill. It's not far.
All right. Your education is so important, Jean.
I guess I need one.
Well, then it's a very good idea that I go and speak to him. Jean, it's very dark up here. I don't see a house or any lights.
We're close. I know because of this apple tree.
Jean, I think we should go back. It's getting quite cold. I want to go back. I'll speak to your father another.
Up the hill, he hit her with a wrench in the back of the head. After he hit her the first time, she went down. And he hit her a couple other places. Then he turned her over, drug her by her right leg, stabbed her with the knife in the neck and some other places. Then he drug her across the road and under a barbed wire fence and hit her behind some bushes.
And what did he say about the wrench?
Oh, the wrench. He said it was an old iron thing, rusty, with a broken wood handle. And the knife. The knife was a long-bladed, slim thing that he had sharpened that day of her death for that purpose.
The defendant renews the objection.
Overruled.
Thank you.
I asked him if he raped her. He said, oh, it never entered his mind. He just wanted revenge. And I asked him, how'd you sleep that night, boy? And he said, I slept as good as I ever did.
Thank you, Mr. Nellis. You are excused. Your Honor, the people rest.
Now, if Your Honor please, the defendant moves that the indictment in this case be dismissed and the jury advised to acquit upon the grounds that there are not sufficient facts connecting the defendant with the commission of the crime.
Motion overruled.
We further move to take from consideration the charge of murder in the first degree,
Motion denied.
murder in the second degree,
Motion denied.
Thomas has placed upon the record the story of how Lida Beecher came to her death. He has pointed the accusing finger at Jean Gianini, a boy of just 16 years of age. The signed confession by Jean was done by a scared boy, under duress, with no attorney present. The facts in this case are gruesome, but we sincerely ask and expect that you will also pay careful attention to the defense. It concerns the subject of human life. Lida Beecher was a beautiful girl of beautiful Christian character, and it is a great misfortune to all who knew her that she came so untimely to her death. But we sincerely believe that the greatest calamity of all has befallen the Giannini family, and the greatest calamity, this boy. Gentlemen of the jury, it becomes necessary at this time to reveal the secrets. The family secrets that this boy's father has kept covered, but which awoke again in the closing days of March. They are sad to relate, but the truth must now be told.
I wrote this letter to the George Junior Republic with regard to Jean. Dear sirs and madams, I was very much impressed by the work done for and by the boys and girls of your republic when I visited with a group of Portland National girls 3 years ago. Have you room for one more citizen? A boy of about 15 years. He's a good-hearted boy, one of my pupils last year, and one of my most interesting boys. His mother died when he was too young to remember. Father thinks a lot of the boy and does what he can for him. He just likes schoolwork. He got a working certificate with his father's consent and went to work in the mills. He became restless. If he could get into some place like the George Junior Republic, where he received a little treatment as well as hard work, it would be fine for him. This is what I wanted for Jean. There is more to this letter, and I will read the rest to you later, but I know Mr. McIntyre is eager to present his case. I truly cared for Jean. I could see how the other children would make fun of him, take advantage of him, knew to some degree at least why he was so unhappy at home. The conditions, environment into which he was born and raised, family secrets defense was about to reveal. The other dark tragedy in this case.
Your Honor, the defense calls Charles Giannini.
Jean's father.
Please state your age, Mr. Giannini.
46.
When and where were you married for the first time?
In 1890 to Sally McVeigh in New York City.
And as to the result of that marriage, what children were born?
Charlie, Catherine, and Jean?
Jean being the defendant.
Yes, sir.
What doctor was present at the birth of your first child?
Dr. Francis J. Quinlan.
Dr. Quinlan testified that Sally Giannini, now deceased, was in a state of depression before the birth of their first child, Charlie. Continually nervous, crying, twitching, he said, and then she'd go into a morbid silence.
When I first met her, she was very bright, interesting, intelligent, very fond of society and dancing and music, very good piano player, fine singer. She had the voice.
Having known Sally since she was a child, Dr. Quinlan had noticed peculiar symptoms even before her marriage to Charles Giannini, but noted they became more marked after the marriage,
That all changed.
and even more pronounced when she became pregnant. And when the baby came, Dr. Quinlan said Sally was indifferent to Charlie, pushing him aside, ignoring his existence.
Melancholia due to pregnancy.
Not so! This was more profound.
She seemed to have lost her intelligence and cleverness. She no longer played the piano, and when she was able to get up, we all wanted her to go out. She refused, saying she was black.
I don't dare go into the streets.
She persisted in this delusion for months and imagined things. She once pulled her sister out into the hallway to show her awful things on the wall. Her sister, of course, couldn't see anything.
You can't see them, because you don't look through the same eyes as I do. But they're there.
The baby. Poor Charlie.
A very poor little baby. She shunned him. She had a dislike for the baby. One day, Sally's mother and the nurse couldn't find the baby. Sally had put him out in the shed in the yard.
When did Charlie die?
1899, he was almost 8. As a baby, he had been weak and sickly. His mother couldn't take care of him. I was obliged to give him out to a nurse who took him to her house. Never walked until he wiggled across the floor. He never walked properly until 6 or 7. He'd stumble along, never spoke properly, just made sounds as and he died suddenly, choked to death. You see, he ate very gluttonously. He would eat until you would stop.
Tell us how your wife's habits changed.
About 5 or 6 months after Charlie's birth, she went out and took to drink. Became more stupefied, helpless.
And this condition continued through the birth of your second child. When was that child born?
1894, Catherine.
Did you find liquor bottles around the house?
Very often. Whiskey or brandy.
If you don't feel composed, I can suspend questioning for a moment.
No, it's all right. Go ahead.
Did she go to the priest in New York City to take the temperance pledges?
Yes, at my request and the request of her family.
I hereby enter the pledges in evidence.
Mrs. Giannini has taken the pledge for 12 months. Temperance prayer to be said every day.
For those who drink habitually, and for those who in danger of death by drinking, Lord Jesus, by thirst on the cross, save us from intemperance.
September 23rd, 1893.
And the next child born,
1897, Jean.
the defendant. Between the birth of your second child and the birth of the defendant, please describe your wife's condition concerning the use of liquor.
She used considerable liquor. I saw her drunk many times. I once found her drunk in my store on the floor. We had been looking for her the night before. Apparently she came in through the back window.
When Jean was in her womb, describe her condition.
She was drunk continuously.
Angelica Putnam, an acquaintance of the Gianninis, testified and confirmed that she often saw Sally drunk.
When Jean was born, describe his appearance.
Very puny, sickly looking, smaller than a sack of flour.
Was he nursed by his mother?
Never. Fed with a bottle. She rejected Jean at birth. She never looked at him, never held him. She never acknowledged him as her son. He was taken away from her.
How long after the birth of the defendant did he appear to continue to be puny and sickly?
He was probably a year old. I gave him out to another nurse outside the family, Mrs. Lay.
How long was he in the custody of Mrs. Lay?
About 5 or 6 years.
You saw Jean frequently?
Very often.
When did Jean begin to talk?
He was about 5 years of age. Before that, he would just yell, just make sounds like
Aye.
that. And when he was about 5, he began to talk, called Mrs. Lay Mama.
Ma. Ma.
I brought Jean back. Mrs. Lay died. But it was very hard for him to talk, very hard for him to improve. And by the time I brought him back with me, his mother had died at St. Anne's Sanitarium of meningitis, heart failure due to alcoholism.
Ma. Ma.
Eventually, you moved with Jean from Manhattan to the Bronx, where you lived for several years.
Yes, sir, living with my stepmother.
When in the Bronx, what did you observe concerning the defendant's behavior?
Jean would come to my stepmother and myself and try to trick us repeatedly out of giving him pennies for candy, saying that others were stealing the pennies from him. He grew suspicious. I told him, I threatened him, and if he didn't tell me the truth, I would give him a
What else?
neighbor once complained that Jean had taken his 2 little girls into the woods and started taking their clothes off. The neighbor caught them, brought Jean home to be punished. Jean told me that his intention was to play Indian, and that Indians were native.
What else did you observe?
Coming home one Saturday afternoon, after work, I saw a group of children making considerable noise, laughing, calling someone Ronnie. I saw Jean in the gutter, his face covered with mud, and he was eating, as he later told me, mud pie. And children were calling him Looney and saying he did not.
Anything else?
When I was remarried, we moved to Stebbins Ave, and there Jean would tease and torment the neighborhood children, running away with one's wagon, taking a boy's hat, throwing it over the fence, taking girls' caps, throwing them around. Another time, he chased a girl with a table knife.
Did he cut her?
No. They interfered. He got very angry. But suddenly, his whole manner changed, as if he forgot all about it. Went to his spelling book.
Now, in 1910, you left the Bronx and moved to Poland, New York.
Yes. With my wife and 3 little girls, by my second wife, my daughter Catherine, we called her Marty, and Jean. One day, Jean chased Marty with the table knife. Chased her around the room.
Did he strike her with the knife?
No. I told him to stop. He stopped, threw the knife on the table, went out of the room.
How long was Jean in school in Poland?
From fall 1910 to about February, March 1913. I got him a working certificate. He started working at Newport at the knitting mill. He jumped a train, ran away to Ilion. I found him there working at a hotel, wiping dishes, brought him back. And he worked at a farm, doing chores. And he ran away to Albany for 2 or 3 weeks. He later told me that he had been shot at 2 or 3 times by the railroad police and was arrested.
Were there any wounds on his body that would indicate he had been shot?
I didn't see it. Another time he ran away to her. See the movie pictures. First he went to the Union store in Poland, bought a can of beans and a bunch of bananas. He later told me that he ate all the bananas first because he was afraid that they would melt.
What would melt?
The bananas. That night he opened the can of beans with a nail and ate them with a nail.
Was there not an incident where you punished him for tormenting his sister?
Probably did. Made them cry. Blamed him.
You punished him corporally.
My hand.
Now, where did you hit him? Did you cuff him about the head and the face?
Think so.
And did he cry?
Yes, sir. He hollered.
Now, how else would you punish him?
I whipped him. I'd have taken a whip.
A horse whip.
Father, don't.
Think it was?
Now, wasn't there an incident where you took his head between your hands and pounded it on the floor? Another incident where you took him by the throat with your left hand, and backed him up against the wall, and smacked him around with your right hand?
I have no recollection.
And how would he react when you punished him?
He would holler.
And that's a perfectly rational reaction, is it not?
I object, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I am just trying to show that all of these things that are attributed to this defendant are completely rational reactions. He teased other children because he himself was teased by others. He ate mud pies because he was goaded into it by other children. He ran away from home because his father beat him. Even when you asked him a few questions after the murder, you found his response to be completely rational. Did you not?
Rational at the time.
I have no more questions for this witness.
The defense now calls Roberta N. Robinson. Mrs. Robinson, please state your business.
Principal of the Poland High School.
You knew the defendant in this case, Jean Gianini,
I do.
and you knew Lida Beecher, and that Jean Gianini was a student in her department?
He was during part of last year.
Now, you have heard, I'm certain, in testimony given here, that Jean was placed in a seat towards the wall and separated from the other children.
Yes, I placed that seat there and I directed him to sit in it. I told Jean that he should occupy that seat until he could do better. That I did not place him there as punishment, simply to remove the cause of temptation, talking to other boys out of order.
It was about 6 weeks before Jean left school that you had him placed there,
Yes,
and he remained separated from the other students until he left school?
I believe he did from mid-February until the beginning of April. The scheme was entirely my own. I told Miss Beecher that I thought it would be easier for her to handle the boy if he was separated from the others.
Did Miss Beecher punish him at all?
Sometimes by keeping him after school, through my advice and orders.
And those advice and orders were given in Jean's presence, so he would have known who it was who was directing him to remain after school.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever hear Miss Beecher speak any sharp or irritating words to Jean?
Never did.
What progress was he making before he left school?
He was doing fairly well in spelling and geography and history and English. Not as well in arithmetic.
The other 20 pupils or so who were in the same class with Jean, they were all younger than he, were they not?
Yes, about 2 years younger.
Who administered any corporal punishment to Jean?
It's hard to... As I remember, it was in a recitation room upstairs with a rubber tube. On another occasion, I shook him down in the hall. He was not behaving himself.
Jean's previous teacher for the 4th and 5th grade, Miss Davis, would also shake him. For talking out of turn in class, she said she'd stand it for as long as she could, then would take him by the coat collar out into the hallway and give him a severe shaking.
I recall that. One other day, Miss Davis kept me after school. I must have done something. I don't know. But we were in the room alone together, and she grabbed a ruler from a desk. I thought she was going to whip me with it. It won't do you any good, I told her. You can whip me. You can even horsewhip me. I get that at home. But it won't do you any good.
She said she wasn't going to whip you, and you began to cry.
Nobody likes me. Nobody cares about me.
She said that she cared for you, didn't she, Jean? And as long as you behaved, there would be no more trouble between you. And there never was any more in her class.
No.
And the next occasion, Professor?
Well, it was probably along in March in the hall.
With this hose in your hand?
Yes, I talked with the boy a few minutes and then I started to punish him.
How?
With the hose, upon the body once or twice.
For 3 minutes at a time.
And I told him that he should not hold a grudge against Miss Beecher for it, that he was old enough that he ought to behave himself without Miss Beecher being required to punish him.
Shall I continue for 30 minutes, Professor?
That is enough, Mr. McIntyre.
You are excused, madam. The defense now calls Dr. Henry H. Goddard, Dr. Carlos F. McDonald, Dr. Walter Suter, Dr. Charles Bernstein.
Now the doctors are to testify. Dr. Goddard is a psychologist. Dr. Suter of Herkimer, a physician. Dr. Bernstein, a physician and a surgeon. And Dr. McDonald, an alienist. In your time, an alienist would be known as a psychiatrist or a forensic psychologist, someone who studies and treats those with issues of the mind and mentality. It said they were called alienists because their patients were so alienated from their true natures. All of these doctors had extensive experience dealing with those afflicted with various mental disabilities.
Tell me, Dr. Goddard, whether you have had any connection with hospitals for the insane.
Personally, that would include the examination or diagnosis of between 2,500 and 3,000 patients a year. I have seen approximately 25,000 patients twice a year for the last 7 years. I have seen between 75,000 and 100,000 patients over 43 years. I have written many articles for journals, medical schools, and others on the subject of feeble-mindedness and criminality.
And the prosecution had its own alienist, Dr. Charles Wagner, Dr. Charles Pilgrim, and Dr. Willis Ford.
And you have been appointed by the governor of the state of New York and the state Supreme Court of New York to investigate criminal cases in which insanity may or may not have been present?
I have.
And you, Dr. Wagner, are a graduate of Columbia Cornell University. You worked at the Utica Hospital for the Insane, and you have written papers for the American Journal of Insanity.
That is correct. At present, I am the superintendent of the Hospital of the Insane at Binghamton, New York.
And your colleagues have been accepted by this court as expert witnesses.
Dr. Wagner, you have heard in testimony that Doctors Goddard, McDonald, Suter, and Bernstein have seen literally hundreds of thousands of feeble-minded patients. By your own count, how many such patients have you treated?
About 100.
100. And they were committed by other physicians?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Goddard, have you made an examination of the defendant?
I have. On the 14th of April of this year at the Herkimer County Jail, I made a thorough examination of his mental and physical condition.
Dr. Wagner, did you see this defendant sometime in April?
I did on the 15th of April with Dr. Palmer, on the 20th, and again on the 26th.
What was disclosed by your examination?
His pulse was 86. His reflexes were normal. He was short-sighted. He wore glasses. His head was small in size and irregular, wanting in symmetry.
His head was generally normal in shape. Dr. Pilgrim also examined him, said his head was normal. The average mean circumference of a normal head is 21 inches. The defendant measured 21 1/4, but his ears were large and poorly shaped.
His tongue had a whitish coating upon it.
Slightly coated.
His bodily development was lopsided. His gait was ambulated and irregular, slightly bow-legged.
He walked in a normal fashion.
You didn't notice his shambling gait, doctor?
At times I did, at times I didn't, but it was of no consequence.
He had the formation of a palate, quite frequently found among those with mental defects, idiots, imbeciles, and the like.
The roof of his mouth was a little large, but normal.
In your conversation with him during this examination at the jail, what were some of the things that the defendant told you?
As to his father's punishment, he said that one time he wanted to buy a hat, but his father said he would have a very hard time finding one small enough because his head was so small. And he had a hard time sleeping at the jail.
We talked about his schooling. He talked at length about murder cases he had read about. Asked if he was old enough to get the electric chair. He told me he would not talk about Miss Beecher as his lawyer advised him on not speaking about her.
And he confessed to the murder of Lida Beecher.
She was using me bad. She used to have the professor come down. She snitched on me. I sat in the corner 5 weeks.
And did you kill her on that account?
Yes, just for revenge. Am I gonna get out of this all right?
That would depend if you're responsible or not.
Do you think you had the right to kill her for revenge?
Yes. I'm not sorry for what I've done.
What did you kill her with?
A knife from her pantry. A wrench from my father's barn.
Do you think that is funny?
Well, it ain't gonna be any sadder than it ought to be. Might as well be cheerful about it.
You don't feel badly about it?
All I feel sorry for is that it makes trouble for me.
Do you think it's wrong to kill a person?
Yes.
Do you know what your defense is going to be?
If they find I ain't right in the head, then I won't get the chair. I suppose I should get 20 years to life.
Do you think you were all right at the time of the crime? I mean, do you think your mind was right?
Yes, I think so. What do the papers have on me? What headlines do they have? Have they printed my picture yet? Do you know they're keeping me in the same cell that Chester Gillette had? The very same one.
Jean was obsessed with Chester Gillette, pulp novels, and criminals.
In your chair.
You don't consider yourself insane.
I might be feeble-minded, but not insane.
Jean, do you know who the president is?
Lincoln. I'm not saying any more to you.
If you're convicted, do you think you ought to pay the penalty?
I should have to. My jailers asked me if I had any nicknames. I told them they called me Whoppy because I'm Italian. In New York, they called me Jean the Sunburned Bean to make me mad. They called me crazy. The kids did.
He always told me he got along well with the other children.
As a result of this dialogue and the examinations that you made at the jail, what diagnosis did you arrive at?
The defendant is suffering from a degree of mental state known as, sometimes I have described as imbecility. It's a form of mental unsoundness due to arrest of development. There are 3 grades on the arbitrary scale: low grade, medium, and high grade.
Of what grade imbecile is this defendant?
On the arbitrary scale, between high grade and medium.
And high being close to normal.
It may approach very closely.
Dr. Wagner?
In my opinion, at the time of my examination, and at the time of the murders, he was not an imbecile. He was sane.
Dr. Goddard, what condition in the mother may exist to create such a condition?
Oh, there are a great variety of conditions. Feeble-mindedness, alcoholism, insanity.
Doctor, have you read the University of London medical paper that states the general health of children of alcoholic parents appears on the whole slightly better than that of sober parents?
Is Your Honor going to permit this absurdity? In other words, it would behoove every mother and father to get drunk so as to have better children.
It might be incentive for drunkards to have more children.
And imbeciles would increase and prosper as a result.
Let's proceed with the case, gentlemen. Objection overruled.
Now, Doctor, being aware of the facts in this case, can you state whether the defendant was imbecilic or not?
As I said, the defendant is suffering from a form of mental deficiency known as imbecility.
Was Jean Gianini, at the time of the killing of Lida Beecher, in such a condition as to know that the act was wrong?
In my opinion, he did not know that it was wrong.
Are you saying that this defendant did not know that a blow to the head would cause injury to his victim?
I think he did know that.
And with sufficient force, he could bring about the death of his victim.
He did not know in the way that a normal person does.
So, did he know that if he struck a girl on the head, then she falls to the ground, he strikes her 2 more times, and then takes a knife and stabs her? Did he or did he not know that that was wrong?
This is improper. He is attempting to inflame and impassion the minds of the jury. My learned friend here, with a wrench in one hand and a knife in another, looks like he's going out to slay one of the armies of Napoleon.
Overruled, Mr. McIntyre.
Of course.
Tell me, Doctor, in your opinion, did this defendant have a reason for taking Miss Beecher to Buck Hill Road?
I think he did.
And did he have a reason for striking her with a wrench? For stabbing her with the knife that he had prepared the day before? And for hiding the body and then running quickly back to Poland and then getting away from Poland?
Yes, he probably did.
I object.
The fact that he tried to hide the body, he wiped the blood off the knife, he wiped his fingerprints off the wrench, and then quickly got out of Poland. Doesn't that say that he knew what he was doing?
Not in a rational way.
Yes or no, Doctor? Yes or no? Yes or no?
I cannot form an opinion based on that limited statement of facts.
Why is it, Doctor, you keep putting limitations on your answers? Can't you just answer my question?
I have talked on this subject so much that I'm about flowing over.
Doctor, have you yourself become an imbecile?
I am almost one.
Tell us, Dr. Goddard, what did you mean by not in a rational way?
People who are irrational or insane know in the abstract that it's wrong to kill someone, but they don't know this with respect to their own actions. It's done to the impulse of a delusion, which justifies them in their minds that it's right.
Do imbeciles act under such delusions, sometimes with homicidal impulses?
They do.
Can you say with reasonable certainty that at the time the defendant took the life of Lida Beecher, he was acting under a delusion?
In my opinion, he was.
In my opinion, he knew the nature of the act. He knew the act was wrong.
He was under the delusion that the deceased had done him a great wrong, and he removed her for that reason, to revenge an imaginary wrong.
In my opinion, he was not acting under any difficulties or
And the condition of his imbecility was?
Due to inherited tendencies from his mother. His mind only developed to a certain point and then was arrested. He has no moral value. His reasoning and judgment are defective. He has attained the mental age of a child of about 10 years of age.
All 4 of the defense's doctors agreed to that age.
My colleague, Dr. Pilgrim, placed him at a mental age of 15. I, in that regard, felt it was more like 16. While he had limited schooling, which made him deficient in that regard, it did not make him defective.
Now, doctor, you also administered the so-called Binet test to the defendant. What is its purpose?
The test is a series of questions established by the French psychologist Alfred Binet. It's used to test the mental age of a child. It's been used in thousands of cases in many, many institutions to test the feeble-minded. I wrote a book about it.
As a result of these tests and examinations, can you state with reasonable certainty the mental age of the defendant?
According to the test, he has attained a mental age of 10 years. And
I don't
he will
agree.
probably remain that way for the rest of his life.
I don't agree.
You don't agree with a lot of what the experts have to say, now do you, Dr. Wagner?
They are.
We have a great many books here written by experts in the field. Doctors Kreplin, Davarine, Maudsley, Mandel, what of them?
They are older books.
Oh! So, are there any books written in the last 4 or 5 weeks with which you do agree?
Not that I'm aware of.
How about 1 year? 2 years? 5 years? 10 years? Isn't it a fact, Doctor, that you don't agree with anyone but yourself?
They are all the opinions of others.
Oh, so the opinions of the expert doctors we have heard as witnesses in this case are completely and absolutely wrong?
Absolutely wrong.
Even considering that their decades of experience with over 20,000 feeble-minded patients under their direct observation, they are completely and absolutely wrong?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Goddard, what is a protoplasm?
Objection, immaterial.
If the defendant is an imbecile, as these doctors have stated, we should know the consequences upon the embryo, upon the protoplasm of the mother's alcoholic habit. How it reached the protoplasm in her womb, and what effect it had on the embryo as it developed.
I would like to inquire of the court whether we may have a clinic here.
I object to the tone.
I'd hate to go and get a dead body and bring it in unless we have permission of the court. I'd like to have a little medical clinic.
I take exception to the remarks.
Really, I want to have the court's permission before I bring the dead body in. I've got one home in Pickle Brine.
I have trouble enough with the questions.
See what a muddle we've got here now?
You're being paid for your trouble, Mr. Thomas. Do not complain.
There ain't no amount of money that'll pay a man for delving into protoplasm.
Doctor, what is the effect of alcohol upon protoplasm?
It tends to prohibit growth, and it disables nutrition. There are many ways that alcohol can affect the brain of a child, but it arrests development.
In my opinion, it's not likely to affect a child adversely.
Doctor, let me read to you from a Dr. Tregold, who has written extensively on this subject. Enter into evidence. Let's see here. Ingestion of alcohol is speedily followed by its appearance in the blood. Consequently, the alcohol imbibed by a pregnant woman very soon comes in contact with the tissues of the embryo. It has been conclusively shown by numerous experiments that alcohol exerts a most marked, baneful influence upon the growing protoplasm, and the systematic abuse of alcohol during gestation is likely to be followed by decidedly injurious consequences to the offspring. Now, doctor, is that correct or incorrect?
They are greatly over-exaggerated statements.
Dr. Goddard, have you ever known of imbeciles to commit a homicide?
I have. There are many cases when acting under the delusion of persecution.
Doctor, did you have the opportunity to observe the behavior of the defendant at any time during this trial?
I have. I observed it whenever the knife and the wrench were presented. he would most likely have a smirk on his face, a silly, foolish grin. Sometimes he would wink. And when the matter in which the body was dragged was so crudely brought forth, he laughed. Any normal child of his age would frown and shrink away from it. But he acted with pleasant interest.
Don't you think he knows how his behavior is being viewed by this court? Don't you think he could be feigning imbecility?
No! Imbecility cannot be feigned.
Thank you, Doctor. Your Honor, the defense rests.
All of the witnesses have now been heard. From the prosecution, representing the people of the state of New York, the defense, representing Jean. Now the attorneys are to give their closing arguments.
Gentlemen of the jury, we have had fair and just treatment from the bench and have had the benefit of your earnest and thoughtful patience during this trial. I have come here to defend one whose abnormality must be apparent to you all, made such by his God, whose judgments cannot be questioned by the human mind. If I believed that this boy, with sanity, had put an end to the life of Lida Beecher, that sweet, mild teacher, I would not be standing here lifting up my voice on his behalf. But I ask you to put aside your passions and your hatreds and consider the evidence as we have presented it. The defense of mental disorder may be repugnant, but when it is honestly presented, it becomes your duty to accept it. It becomes your duty to vote him not guilty. Jean Gianini had no real reason to end the life of Lida Beecher, that girl of unparalleled sweetness. She was always kind and understanding with him, whereas it was Principal Robinson who administered his corporal punishments. But there was no outburst of violence against Robinson. Instead, he was impelled to end the life of Lida Beecher, impelled by an insane delusion that she was committing wrongs to him that required revenge. And a delusion which was empowered by nothing but a false belief. And the family. Mother insane, dies in the throes of alcohol. His brother Charlie, a helpless idiot. God, was there ever a family so more afflicted? And now, will you add one more affliction to this boy? His death in the electric chair? If you reach the conclusions, as I have, upon these facts, it is your solemn duty to vote him not guilty by reason of imbecility, that he may be taken elsewhere for the balance of his life, and never once again come into our midst. As an officer of this court, it is my holy duty to save his life, to keep him from the hands of the executioner, who will take him from his cell, shave the head, slit the trousers, and placing him in the chair, his arms fastened, the electrodes brought down, the feet upon a wet mat, the electrode placed upon the right leg. The executioner drops his handkerchief. A shock runs through. A spasm afterward. And death. Gentlemen of the jury, I ask you, in the name of God, in the name of right, in the name of law and justice, to spare this unfortunate creature from the electric chair.
Mr. Thomas.
Gentlemen, do not be duped by the splendor and dazzling verbosity of the defense lawyer's speech, nor by his expert witnesses who tried to bring forth these mysterious theories to befuddle the mind of the jury. Now, this defense actually tried to reach up and call down the Almighty and blame him for this boy. To the point of why he blamed Miss Beecher and not Professor Robinson. Did he have the judgment of a man? No. But he did have the judgment of a boy his age. And because boys his age are not the same as men, they don't fall in the category of insanity. Look around your own towns and villages. You will see a few people that are a little strange, a little peculiar, but they are not insane. No, he blamed Lida Beecher for his humiliation, and he shattered the life of that innocent angel. And he confessed to the crime. Perhaps just to get a little bit of leniency here, he planned this crime and lured her to that spot on Buck Hill Road with ingenuity, cool deliberateness, and cunning. This was not the act of an imbecile. It was a deliberate, premeditated design to murder. He was more cunning than any criminal that ever lived. Now, if you are convinced that this defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, then see that justice is done. But if you think that he is insane, then maybe he will be put away for the rest of his life. But perhaps in 6 months, he will be re-examined, found sane, and thrown out into the world to repeat the crime that he committed here. You owe it to your daughters, your sisters, and to those of other people. You have a responsibility of protecting them. Consider the evidence, gentlemen. And if common sense tells you that he is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, then let the law take care of him. What the law does to him is the law's responsibility and not yours.
Gentlemen, from the jury, this is a criminal action.
The judge will now instruct the jury in their duty to deliberate, render a judgment. How would you vote, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, I'd like to finish reading the letter I wrote to the George Junior Republic regarding Jean. If he could get into some place like the George Junior Republic, where he received a little treatment as well as hard work, it would be fine for him. He responds to kindness very readily, He is not a bad boy by any means. He is simply unhappy at home, but is ambitious and has other fine qualities that would develop if only he had a little guidance to show him that he really can amount to something should he choose. I talked with Jean about it tonight. He seems quite interested. Signed, Lida Beecher. I can only imagine how things may have turned out differently for Jean, or myself, if he had been able to attend that school. On May 28, 1914, the jury returned to the court at 2:43 p.m.
Gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?
We have.
What say you, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty. We acquit on the ground of criminal imbecility.
Gentlemen, you are excused. Mr. McIntyre, the proper commitment papers will be made out, committing the defendant to the Matawan State Hospital for the criminally insane.
Jean was transferred to that facility on June 1st, where he spent the next 52 years. He was then transferred to Kings Park Psychiatric Center on Long Island, and then finally to a nursing home in Far Rockaway, Queens, where he passed away February 22nd at the age of 90. The local newspapers and much of the general public were not pleased with the jury's judgment on the case. On the street, jurors were jeered at and called incompetent. An editorial in the Ilion Citizen newspaper expressed its astonishment and disgust, saying the jury had been duped by a slick New York City lawyer. Practically granted me sainthood, calling me a road angel.
They called me a young devil and said I was as guilty as a dog. But after the trial, I told those reporters, if given the chance, I would have never committed the murder and would never do such a thing again.
My father, the Reverend Beecher, a most forgiving man, went to visit Jean in his jail cell. No one knows what was discussed between them, and my father never disclosed that information. But I believe that he, being the devout Christian that he was, forgave Jean. Surely we all must honor this. So why did the jury find Jean not guilty? Perhaps there in the courtroom, they could make note of his posture, look into his eyes, see the confusion, the vacancy, and the loss. Maybe the testimony of the doctors spoke to their hearts. Perhaps the soul-rending revelations of Jean's mother, her spiral down into a maelstrom of alcoholism and manic behavior. Surely Jean was the victim of all of that. They called him a young devil. Yet Jean was born, as all children are, an innocent angel. But he and his mind were shattered. Shattered before he had the chance to discover the wonderful dream his life may have been.